So the police came over, they asked me a few questions, and after asking me a few questions, the nice officer said, "I'm afraid I'm going to have to place you under arrest." And I was shocked, and I didn't even know what to say. I come from a law enforcement family. Like I said, my mom's a retired correctional officer and former LAPD officer. And so I was just stunned, and I said, "You're kidding me, what, for what?" And she said, "For carrying a weapon in New York City, for carrying a loaded weapon in New York City without a permit." And I said, "Well, I'm not carrying it. I mean, it's in that case, which is in my luggage." And she said, "Well, in New York City, that's considered carrying a weapon. It's if it's in your constructive possession, and you can get to it anywhere, then you are now carrying." So obviously, you know, common sense, real language doesn't apply in New York any longer. And I said, "Well, it's not loaded. I mean, you can see right there, it's unloaded." She said, "Well, you have ammunition with you, so that makes the weapon loaded." Some of you might have read George Orwell and know about the language the executive used. So here I was with an unloaded weapon, which I was not carrying on my person, locked in a TSA-approved case, and I was actually charged with carrying a loaded weapon with intent to do harm. It's a Class 3 felony, punishable by 15 years on Rikers Island. We're doing what any American should be able to do, which is exercise their fundamentally protected constitutional right under the Second Amendment. So I'm standing there that morning in front of the ticket counter, and it's very early. I'll never forget. I mean, it's just, some things just stick with you for your entire life. I'm sure these memories will never go away. And the police officer asked me to turn around and put my hands behind my back so that she could handcuff me. Because obviously I looked like your typical criminal. More like your typical cowboy, but in New York, I guess that's pretty unusual. And she handcuffed me, and I'll never forget the sound of those handcuffs closing around. If you've ever experienced that feeling, it was cold that morning, and the officer had obviously been outside before she arrested me, and that cold metal on my wrist, and that sound of that ratcheting close of the cuffs behind your back, it's pretty horrible. And she led me out to the squad car, and my head was spinning. And, you know, I was dressed pretty much like I am today. I was wearing a black cowboy hat, and I had a dark wool pea coat on because it was cold there. And I remember just, you know, when I come out of the airport a lot of times, if you guys, if anybody's traveled a lot, there's a certain freedom that comes when you walk out the doors, that rush of fresh air. You've been in an airplane, you've been in an airport, you walk out the doors and the fresh air is, for me, it's really a wonderful feeling when I walk out of the airport, especially when it's cold. I like it when it's cold. And so I remember those doors sliding open, and the officer firm hand on my arm, and she was to my left side holding me by the arm, and I remember everybody staring. You know, I must have looked like quite a spectacle there in the airport, dressed like a cowboy, the officer leading me out by the arm. I remember that feeling, the cold air rushing over, and it didn't feel good, it just felt cold. You know, and so she put me in the back of the squad car. If you've never been in the back of the squad car, it's not comfortable. I guess they're not intended to be. And I'm getting a little old to be stuffed in the back of the squad car. And it's, I got driven to a place in LaGuardia. I remember the feeling of driving around and thinking, I don't know where I'm going. And I have no idea what's next, and feeling really out of control. And that somebody else was now completely in control of my destiny in my life, and I had no idea where I was. I had no idea where they were taking me. I had no idea what was going to happen next. Thinking about my family, thinking about you guys, thinking about, did I just let the movement down? Is there going to be political fallout from this? And they took me to jail out in LaGuardia. They have a temporary holding area there. I remember walking into a government, obviously a government building, very plain paint, and being led by the arm down a long corridor, and I could see a cell at the end of the corridor. I remember being led into that cell, and you know, my mom worked at the jail up in Nevada County, so I've seen jails from the outside. It's different. And the officer turned me over to a different officer, put me in the cell, turned me around, unlocked my handcuffs, went through my pockets, asked me for all my stuff, took my jacket, and then walked out and closed the door behind me. And I remember turning around. Sorry. When you are inside a jail cell, and you hear that door close, and you see that door sliding closed, and you hear that sound, you guys have all heard that sound on TV, in the movies. They always pump up the volume on that sound, the clanging of the cell door, right? It's nothing like that in real life. It's 100 times louder. And it rattles through your head because it's so much more than a sound. And in that moment when that door closes and it locks and you're on the inside, you hear that sound, that's the sound of liberty being lost. And it's in that moment for me, for the first time in my entire life, liberty was a lot more than an idea. It was a real deal, and somebody had just taken it away from me because all I'd done was exercise my rights as an American citizen under the United States Constitution. And it changed me. It changed me forever. It's, you know, it makes you think about things in a different way. And I never had the privilege of serving my country. I appreciate the vets who did. I'm sure when you serve like that, it makes you think about liberty in a different way. And it affected me in a way so that I understand that liberty is a very thin veneer of liberty between us and tyranny. And I saw it go away in a minute. Now, everything, the story ends happily, everything's turned out okay. It took about a month, thousands of dollars in legal fees. I called my wife, imagine getting this call in California at 3 in the morning. She gets woken up by me saying, honey, I'm okay, but I'm in jail. And no, I haven't been drinking. And, but it, you know, there was an incredible amount of pressure from the New York District Attorney's Office. You got 15 years facing you. And when I came out of the courtroom, it took 12 hours. I was in there 12 hours. Oh, by the way, they took me to Queens. And so whatever you think about the Queens Central Jail, yeah, you're right. I don't think the holding cells have been cleaned in 25 years. It's just disgusting in there. You know, the New York City Police were plenty kind to me. I mean, and I didn't see anything bad in that regard, but you're in a holding cell with 20 to 40 other folks. Just amazing stuff you hear in there. And, you know, here I am in on a gun charge because I declared my weapon. I'm listening to all these guys talk about all the different weapons they own and have stash. I'm thinking, man, this is one crazy place where law-abiding citizens can't own guns, but everybody else does. So 12 hours, my lawyer finally gets me out, and you know, when I got out, I went into the courtroom. They tell you what the charges are against you. They release me on my own recognizance. Luckily, I had a lawyer that's done over 400 of these cases. And so he gets me out, and as I come out of the courtroom, the nice district attorney's office has been kind enough to let the media know what's going on. So I'm treated just like everybody else, of course.
Right.
So the cameras are waiting. I have to deal with that as I come out of the courtroom. And ultimately, over the next month, we've had a little bit of communication with them. And they do to me what they do to everybody else, which is they allow me to plead guilty to disorderly conduct, which in New York City means you've exercised your Second Amendment rights. The Constitution doesn't apply in New York City any longer. And they keep your weapon. This is an interesting thing. There's no law that says they're allowed to keep your weapon. All criminal charges against me have been dropped. So you would think that they would give you your gun back, but they don't do that. In fact, they just keep them. This is what they do. And the tragedy and the travesty of what happened is really not what happened to me. The real travesty is that this happens to people every single day. On average, 2 people a day in New York City. It happens at LaGuardia Airport, other airports around the area. It happened, you may have heard, it happened to a nurse at the 9/11 memorial. Went there, she was from Tennessee, and declared, she saw these signs, declared she had a loaded weapon in her purse, and so they arrested her for her honesty. And so the travesty is that this is a violation of my Second Amendment rights, violation of the Fourth Amendment rights, and it's happening to hundreds of people. And the real shame is, it's not just the Second Amendment. The real issue is that they're taking away our liberty there, here in California, and states all around the country every single day. This is going on every day. Y'all have heard the story or the parable of the frog in the pot of boiling water, right? If you boil it slowly enough, that frog will never hop out of the water, it will boil to death. But if you turn the heat up right away, obviously the frog knows what's going on. Well, in this country, for decades, they've been turning up the heat slowly. And they've been doing it by shaving our liberty away step by step by step. Whether it's Second Amendment or Fourth Amendment or 10th Amendment in regard to states' rights. And the problem is that we, Haven't done anything about it, right? Who do we blame? We blame generally the politicians, right? Those bad politicians. We, those of us who are conservatives, tend to blame the politicians on the left. They frustrate us. They are destroying the Constitution. They don't care about liberty. They don't care about the Constitution. We talk about that all the time. I do. I've been complaining about it for years. I haven't done anything about it, but I've been complaining about it. Right? And then they slowly shave away our constitutional liberties. You know that the Second Amendment is pretty clear. It says that the government shall not infringe upon our right to keep and bear arms. Right? You guys familiar with that one? The language isn't really complex. Since my incident in New York City, I've read it and reread it and reread it. I keep looking for the part that says, except in New York City. I haven't been able to find that part. I keep looking for the part that just says, except as people think is reasonable. Haven't been able to find that part. I keep looking for the part that says, except as any state or city might decide to do. I can't find that part either. Okay, and so the point is that we've allowed this to happen as we've moved from a more rural society to a more urban and suburban society, and less people have had guns historically, have grown up with guns. We've allowed the government to shave away those rights. Thomas Jefferson said, the slightest breach against the Constitution is a complete breach of the whole. Because if we allow them to shave away those rights in some area because we just don't care or we're just not paying attention, what happens? Then they shave away the next and the next and the next. And it's not just the left. You know, recently in the United States Senate, they proposed a job bill. Now I realize, and this was the Republicans, I realize the Republicans can't get anything done in the U.S. Senate because Harry Reid won't even let it come to the floor, right? So they're completely stifled. But they keep putting forth bills, and they put forth some pretty good stuff. How many people think that we need medical malpractice reform in this country? Anybody think lawyers are a problem in this country? I didn't tell you in advance I'm a lawyer.